With what material did that creator manifest everything? So I want to get into some specific details about the question. As we understand it, there are the different elements of nature: earth, water, fire, air, ether, the senses, the objects of the senses, and so forth. So they exist in three different states. And this is in the flux of one creation, and then the maintenance of the creation, and ultimately the devastation. So as we understand it, the aggregate of the material elements in the state of being when they're all manifest, that is called prakriti. When they are in the unmanifest state, they are called the pradhan. So when God creates the universe from the unmanifest state, that state before a creation, not the creation, a creation, that is called the pradhana. That is the undifferentiated, unmanifest aggregate of all elements of nature. You can understand it like a cosmic soup. At that time, earth, water, fire, air, ether, hearing, seeing, touching, tasting, the objects of the senses, they're all just one undifferentiated aggregate. That is called the pradhan. So God uses this pradhan to impregnate, meaning with his desire. When God impregnates, it means by his will. He manifests creation from the unmanifest. Then it is at the manifest state. Now, while it is, you could say, assembling to manifest, the undifferentiated aggregate of elements starts to form into its, you could say, separate ingredients, differentiated ingredients, preparing to manifest into material form. Like our form is the aggregate of, there is earth, there is water, there's fire, there's ether. Then you can go into the kind of sub-elemental theories. At the state when it's preparing for full manifestation of the universe, that is called the Mahatattva. In that state, there's also the element of time, the time factor. The state prior to that, known as the Pradhan, at that state, even the time factor is not so much present, even though it is present as one of the undifferentiated elements of being. Now, when they come into full manifestation of the material forms, that is called the Prakriti. Ultimately, the material that creator is using is the eternal substance through which everything is existing in this material creation. The multiverse, meaning the multiplicity of existences or universes. All of that aggregate, now as we understand it, and I'll just continue a little bit to give the analogy, when everything goes, returns into the unmanifest state from the manifest state, or death, you know, when we are alive now, what happens when we die? We're unmanifest. The entire universe becomes unmanifest. At that point, all of the elements retract one within the other into ultimately the form of God. So that is called, in the Vedanta, the sixth aphorism is Svapyat. And it's a very important teaching, which means that ultimately everything comes one within the other, one element within the other, the higher element, ultimately within the, you could say, the body of the absolute. Only God is that entity who merges only within himself. So this is the Vedantic literature. God does not merge into a higher form, meaning a higher essence. God is self-complete. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate. God is complete. He enters within himself. So when everything winds up its existence in one, you could say, momentary dream of a creation, then it comes into manifest state. The ingredients that are used are called the pradhana. You can think of it as archetypes of being. So what we understand in the Vedantic literature, 8,400,000 species or yonis, archetypes of being. And by the combination of linga yoni, the generative capacity and the receptive capacity, everything springs into life. Now, there are these different archetypes of being. At the same time, we understand it that ultimately it's all coming from that original source. Now, in the Gita, and I'll end with this, God says, or Krishna says, that all existence rests upon me like pearls strung upon a thread, meaning it rests upon him. He is the foundation of its existence. And yet, he says that I am at the same time aloof from it. So we do not say God is a plant, God is a idol, God is a soil, God is a mountain, but yet it is an emanation from his energy. And that energy of his manifests in different forms. Now, the last thing I'll mention is that you can look in the physics or scientific ideas of entropy and how everything is going through the transformation of energetic states. When everything ultimately comes to a static state, it's that state of pradhan. So the idea of the universal death, whether you believe in the big crunch or the big freeze, when everything comes to the end of the state of entropy, when it becomes completely static, then that's the undifferentiated, unmanifest state of pradhan. And then when it comes the time for that creative potential to remanifest, then it comes back. So that's why, again, you could say the time factor itself is not manifest in that state of pradhan, because if you again go to entropy, it takes time beyond imagining for that source of the universe from the unmanifest state to again come to the point of being ready for birth.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Learned a lot through that explanation. Thank you.